Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Welcome back to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where business and dentistry happily collide and we talk about all things related to building a practice and a life that you love. Now, our guest today is someone really special. We are having a conversation around purpose because understanding purpose sounds to the uninitiated a little bit nebulous, but for those who have been in business for any length of time, we all understand the risk of being caught in the cycle of doing more and more, chasing more and more, and losing sight of actually what we're here to achieve. My guest today, Carolyn Tate, is the author of 5, soon to be 6 books, and she's had a career that transcends traditional marketing in large corporate spaces, and she's since pivoted into the world of purpose and helping bring that into businesses across Australia and indeed more broadly around the world as well. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and hang with us. I know you're normally busy writing your books today, and so we've distracted you from your work there to come and talk to us, so thank you.
Thanks, Jesse, for the invitation.
Look, I've been looking forward to having a conversation with you around purpose for a little while because it seems a conversation that is becoming more and more common. People seem to be understanding that life is more than just chasing more and more dollars, accumulating more and more stuff. And people are saying, is this really all there is to it? So I wanted to ask you, is it my imagination that this conversation is happening more commonly, or is it a real thing? And why do you think that might be?
Yeah, no, it's not your imagination. There's leaders all over the world talking about purpose now. In fact, there was a letter last year and early this year written by the CEO and chairman of BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world. Larry Fink is his name. And in the letter he wrote last year, it was entitled A Sense of Purpose. And he sends that letter out globally to CEOs everywhere. And in it, he said that no company without a sense of purpose, whether public or private, will reach its full potential. And he said that it will ultimately lose its license to operate from key stakeholders. And I've noticed again in 2019, he sent out another letter to global CEOs entitled Purpose and Profit. And so when you get mainstream traditional corporate leaders actually really writing, talking about, articulating purpose as the number one thing that companies need to be thinking about, I think that says something that purpose has become mainstream and that we're actually at a tipping point. So I'm seeing it more and more and more, some really incredible global trends around why purpose is going to be the driver of profitable and sustainable companies.
So why is it that you think that people toiling away, whether at work or in their own business, are suddenly looking up from the day-to-day shuffling of the feet, going through the motions and going, wow, is this all there is? What is it that's driving that? What's causing that self-reflection or introspection, do you think?
Well, I believe that there is a growing sense of consciousness across the world of people realizing that there's more to life than money and stuff. I think that we've seen a lot of more public instances around the world. I don't want to go into politics and those sorts of things, but we're seeing people just aggrieved because of what's happening in the world around refugees, around Indigenous rights, around the LGBTI community. You know, we're seeing people becoming a lot more aware of the atrocities that are happening around the world. And so I think that's partly helping people understand that there's more justice required in the world. And so they're thinking about what's the contribution, the special thing that I might be able to contribute to alleviate some of those. And combining that again with kind of, well, what is my passion? What do I love doing? What do I love creating? What was I born to do? And how does that actually marry up with what are the issues in the world that need resolving? So I just see that we're seeing an escalation in consciousness. We're definitely seeing it in the millennial generation. And so we're seeing an escalation in consciousness and awareness that our obligation is to make a positive impact in the world.
And I think for everyone who does own a business, I read your blog actually about millennials, and you were recounting an article that I think you'd read somewhere where millennials were leaving the workforce or leaving, a particular role after a relatively short space of time because the owners of the business or the leaders of the business weren't necessarily articulating a purpose. They were tolerating poor behavior from peers and so on. And the premise of your article really was that, hey, we all want that too. We want to work in a place that matters, that's making a contribution, treats people nicely and cares, in essence. And so I guess when I hear letters from CEOs like BlackRock talking about to pursue profit only is not going to be enough. One of the things that when I first heard that, to be honest with you, I thought, well, that's great for big business. I totally get the big business, whether it's Johnson & Johnson or any of those multinational brands. I get how they could integrate that into their business. But we're small, medium enterprises. How do we translate that lofty ambition into something tangible and practical? And I guess that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because you take those ideals and you help people install it into their business in a practical and tangible way. So for people who might be listening to this show, who are generally going to be small business owners, what sort of things help with the translation of that ideal into the real world of their world?
I think the sentiment of having purpose is relevant whether you're a small business, whether you're a community, whether you're a not-for-profit, whether you're a big business. Like, I feel like in a way, the moniker of not-for-profit, for-profit, social enterprise, small business, they're kind of limiting narratives, because we're all humans that run businesses and lives, and we're part of an ecosystem. So I would say that it's almost a cop-out to kind of say it's okay for big business, but we're a small business and we're pedaling every day to make enough money to keep the doors open. I feel like that's a limiting kind of conversation, to be honest. And I feel like that every single one of us has something that we're good at, that we love, that the world needs, and that we can be paid for. And our role is to cultivate those four things and really bring them to the fore. And so for a small business owner, the first thing is articulating my purpose as a leader, particularly if I have staff, I have clients, I have other stakeholders. Why do I exist? So I look to some of the amazing leaders around the world, like Richard Branson, and we see people like Yves Chenard from Patagonia and different companies where they are living their purpose as leaders and they're embedding it in their company. So I think some personal introspection and some personal, why did I become a dentist? All those years ago when I studied dentistry, what was the catalyst for doing that? Reconnecting to that reason. And how does my service make an impact on my staff, on my clients, on my community in which I work? And so I think just really getting granular around why I chose to be in the profession that I'm in, and actually being able to clearly articulate that, my purpose. And I have a framework for people to create purpose statements in my book. And I think being able to share why I exist, and then how does that filter out in through the way I operate my business, in the way I serve my customers, in the way I allow my employees to bring their purpose and meaning to work. So I think it's first and foremost an introspective kind of reconnection to me and my heart, and why I decided to do what I have done in the world.
Totally. And that's that Ikigai process, which I think you've articulated so wonderfully there. And I think coming back to the question, the limiting nature of a question, I totally agree with you, because profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive. You can actually have two. And you mentioned Richard Branson, and I had the very good fortune of spending some time with him a year ago, or 18 months ago. And you're absolutely right. Everything that he does is done with a sense of purpose, and he lives that every single day. And Virgin as a business is commercially very successful, clearly, but equally the contribution that he makes through the work of Virgin Unite and other things is phenomenal. So I agree, that sense of introspection and reconnecting with who we are, why we did this in the first place, is going to be key and critical.
Can I just say one other thing there too, Jesse?
Of course.
ask listeners to consider what they wanted to do before they became a dentist. When they were a kid.
When they were a kid, before the reality filters.
And what motivated them to become a dentist? Because sometimes it can be parents, it can be like your mates doing dentistry, or like, I think a critical analysis of why they chose to take the path they did before they did is actually quite a useful exploration.
Totally. And I can guarantee you as well, Carolyn, there'll be some people who from day one, like almost from the day they entered the world, dentistry was going to be it. But there'll be another cohort who I suspect, and again, I may be wrong, and I'm happy to be challenged on this by the listeners here. Please let me know. But I suspect there'll be a certain proportion of dentists who, for one reason or another, it was not on their radar, and if they're an accidental dentist, if that makes sense. And perhaps when they were growing up, they wanted to be an actor or an actress, and that wasn't a real job, or you're not going to be able to being parents wanting the best for their kids, perhaps steering them to a more financially secure role rather than pursuing that purpose-driven or passion-driven activity.
That's a really good point, and I've lost count of the thousands of people that have said that to me. My number one question is, what did you want to do before you became X? And every single one will have an answer. And I wanted to be a teacher. I became a banker for 20 years. Go figure. So
it's kind of opposite ends of the spectrum somewhat, isn't it?
And I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. And I have some kind of animosity towards my English teachers at the time for not actually being able to cultivate that talent, skill and passion in me, which I think is the purpose of a teacher and a coach and a mentor, really, is to connect people to that thing that drives them, and then help them create a vocation out of that in a way. The thing I'd like to point out there, that it's not an either or, it's an and. You could be a dentist and an actor. I could have been a banker and an author. And that's the thing that I've learned. It's taken me 16 years of being out of the corporate world and writing books. And I think we practice our purpose. I think purpose is a practice. It's like doing your teeth and doing yoga and running your business and exercising and those things. I feel like we need to embed the practice of purpose into our daily lives. But yeah, there's nothing to prevent us from being an and. It's a bit like the clown doctors. I mean, surely those doctors wanted to be actors and clowns and artists of some description before they became a doctor,
Yep. And that's exactly right. I think that's really important as well, because there'll be, as I said, some people going, oh, well, I really wanted to be an actor and now I'm a dentist. Doesn't mean you can't do both. Just pursue the things that you love and enjoy. And I think this comes back to the difference between success and fulfillment a little bit, doesn't it? You might be outwardly very successful, but inwardly, if you're not living on purpose, it's a bit hollow.
Absolutely. And look, the actor that is the dentist that is also an actor is going to have a better practice because of that. And there will always be things that he will learn in the craft of acting that are applicable to growing the business. How you present yourself, articulate yourself. Maybe you're a stand-up comedian, how you use comedy within your practice. Like, there is no thing that I found in people that they love outside of work that cannot be directly applicable to their work. And then if you have a dozen employees or half a dozen employees and they're connected to their thing outside of work, imagine the culture that's going to be created in the business when they feel empowered to be able to bring that gold into their workplace.
So I think this is a really important conversation as well, Carolyn, because sometimes we hear the word purpose and we think of it as an either or, as we mentioned earlier. But I am of the view, and I suspect you're of the view, that a purpose-driven business is actually more commercially successful as well. It's not just a feel good, hold hands, let's know that we're sleeping well at night thing. There is a commercial return on that.
Well, absolutely, and there's a lot of evidence now. And when I do presentations, I really try to attach why purpose drives performance, productivity, profitability, all those other P's. But in between that is it drives humanity. And when you have people that are happy, engaged, wanting to come to work, the statistics around disengagement in the workplace are just horrific. Gallup, in Australia, 74% of employees are actually disengaged at work. They're actually turning up to work. They're dead people working, really, or walking. And the disengagement, so the financial impact of disengaged staff, retention of employees, like if you're losing people because they're not having a sense of purpose at work and they're going off and starting their own business or looking to work for not-for-profit, or they're kind of looking for other companies that are more purpose-driven, you're going to lose quality staff, and we all know what the cost of replacing staff is and getting them trained up and ready to be able to practice. Mental health and well-being, it's proven that a sense of purpose really addresses depression, anxiety, a whole lot of those other mental health issues which we know are escalating in the world. So when we identify the problems that purpose will solve for a business and directly measure how that's going to impact your expenses and your costs, and then it means that you're going to have happier customers. We all know there's 63% of customers now are more loyal to purpose-driven companies as well. So there's the whole side of the customer equation as well. So there's a lot of proof now that a purpose-driven leader and a purpose-driven company will drive the financials.
Which is fantastic. And I think that's actually a really good thing because, ultimately all of us want meaning in our life. It's connection, human connection. You spoke about humanity earlier, and one of my favorite authors is Brené Brown, and she has a saying, I think it's in her book, Daring Greatly, which is connection is what gives meaning and purpose to lives. And I think when we're on purpose, we connect at more frequently and more deeply with other people. And I know you run your deeper dinners that we spoke about off air, and it's really about deepening that connection, having real conversation. And I think, again, if you can integrate that sense into your business, nothing but good can happen. There's no downside to that. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think a thing that I see when I run these deep dinners with teams is that I just see that when you can take people out of the practice or out of the business and get them connected at a deeper level outside of the workplace, and to get them to talk about what really matters to them, I think that then you're starting to create a community almost. Like your business becomes a sense of connected, a community. Like community comes from the word common unity. And as a business, what you want is common unity. You want people working towards the common purpose. So I suspect that there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to really help their people get more connected to their own purpose and more connected to each other. And therefore that then drives a more connected, successful business.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur 100%. Now, ladies and gents, if you've just joined us, we're having a conversation with Carolyn Tate, who is the author of a gazillion different books, but notably, we want to talk about the Purpose Project and a bit about conscious marketing. But before we do get to those, Carolyn, I do want to ask you about your pivot point, because to go from banking to purpose, which is pretty topical in Australia at the moment, banking and purpose, or perhaps where that's been been derailed somewhat. I wanted to ask you, what was that pivot point for you? Because again, I suspect there'll be people listening to this conversation going, yeah, I'm feeling I'm at a crossroad, or I'm approaching a crossroad. And I wanted to ask you about Unstuck in Provence.
I knew you'd have to ask about that. Okay. So I had 20 years in the banking world. I kind of left school and became a banker. And then after 20 years in banking, I ended up taking a lot of marketing roles in banking. So I became a banking marketer, marketing banker, whatever. And then I kind of had a pivot point in my own life. I got divorced, I moved house, I kind of became sole parent, a single mum, not a sole parent, because my son did have a father. But my whole life kind of changed, and I thought I'd throw one more ball in the air at the same time, which was to quit my corporate job and start my own business. It was courageous, but maybe it was also a bit a bit silly. That was a pivot point for me. And then I started my own marketing consultancy. And about 9 or 10 years later, I can remember sitting at my kitchen table and I was doing a marketing plan for a client. And I thought about the product that she was selling and that I was helping her market. And I just had this moment that I felt that I was really out of integrity, that I didn't even like or believe in the product that she was selling, by the way. And I was here helping her market this product, and I just felt really out of integrity. And so then there were other few things in my life too, and I thought again, okay, give it all up, start all over, which is kind of a bit of how I am. So I sold my home, I gave away all my possessions, most of them, closed my business, and I took my son to live in Aix-en-Provence in the south of France for 6 months. So this was the end of 2010. And everyone says it was my eat, pray, love experience. And I joke that you can never have an eat, pray, love experience with a 12-year-old boy in tow. It's just it's impossible.
Yeah, that's
my standard joke, but it's true. But it was my pivot point because it gave me the career circuit breaker after 30 years in banking and marketing to really think about what I wanted to do. And while I was there, I wrote a book because I believe that we find our purpose by doing it, and we test it and experiment and we play with it, and we make it an adventure, not something serious. Like I think a lot of us think, oh, I've got to go off and sit on a mountain in Tibet to find my purpose. Like I realized I think that we find it through doing projects. And so my project while I was in France was to write Unstuck in Provence. And I left France with a 68,000 word manuscript, no idea if it was any good, no idea if I was even brave enough to publish it because it was quite personal. But that 6 months kind of helped me step into owning the confidence, I guess, to say that I'm an author. And then I published that book, and then I started exploring purpose. So I came back in 2011 to Melbourne, and I was kind of absolutely none the wiser. You don't find your purpose kind of in another country or another company. It's a lot of exploring. And so I came back, and a friend of mine recommended I read a book called Firms of Endearment. And it's all about how businesses profit from passion and purpose. The author of it's Raj Sisodia and a couple of other authors. And I read the book, and about 20 pages in, I had this seismic shift in consciousness. And I kind of understood inherently that the future of the world was going to lie with leaders who were driven by purpose, not profit. And so then I just went on this hungry learning journey. I watched docos, I read every book I can on the subject of conscious business and purpose, and I started the conscious capitalism movement with a community here in Victoria. I became a certified B Corporation, and then I wrote conscious marketing, and I wrote the purpose project, and I took on all of these projects. I started a business school which I sold this year, and that for me was the pivot point of 2010. Was for me the time where I just started to take on lots of projects. And each of those projects were profitable in some ways, some of them weren't profitable. And I tested this thing of like, can I really fulfill my purpose, which is to write books that truly matter? And I've come to the conclusion that it's an and. I now do a lot of work around purpose, consulting and building a leadership program, and I'm making that side profitable, and I'm writing the book. So I've kind of been on this journey to explore my purpose and worked out what's the thing that I can make profitable, and and I'm writing my next book as well. So, I've really learned that it's not an either or, it's an and. Yeah.
Which comes back to, for those people listening, if you have something you want to explore and is meaningful and purposeful to you, go and do it. Live your life, because as my dad is fond of saying, you're a long time dead. You get one life, so make the most of it and try and make an impact. Let the world know that you're here. I wanted to ask you then, so you wrote Unstuck in Provence, and obviously that was a pivot point, probably quite cathartic in a sense, given some of the things you'd been through prior to going to France. I wanted to ask you a little bit about conscious marketing, because one of the things that happens in our industry a bit, and I suspect in many others as well, is at a very superficial level. If you said to people, what is it that your business needs, they'll typically say more customers, more leads, in our case, more patients, right? So the marketing piece, everyone kind of gets the need and the desire to have more business. But I want to talk about how to get the right kind of business and how to do that in a sustainable way, a purpose-driven way. And so I wanted to ask you about conscious marketing. What do you mean by that term, and what's it look like in real life?
Yeah, okay. So I think it starts with a business being able to clearly articulate its purpose, and then that drives its communications. So conscious marketing is where companies have a business that does good. Obviously, you're already in that. We all need dentists, and it's not like you're in gambling or tobacco or something. So you're already halfway there. But the second thing is to be able to clearly articulate your unique purpose. So whether that is around maybe you niching in people with dental health problems, maybe cancer patients, or really identifying is where's the difference in the world that your practice is making beyond just doing day to day. And so then that will drive your communication and your marketing plan and your positioning. And then it's also the message and the medium, because there's two parts of marketing. Is what is it that I'm sharing and selling to the world, but also what's the medium that I'm going to be using that's most effective and that is best to connect. So, there's lots of companies that are using different kinds of marketing that I think they're building community. They're actually using marketing that is about sharing good content like you do with this podcast. Do I use marketing that is just hard sell, or do I use communication that is engaging, that's thought-provoking, that is ultimately attracting the customers that you want in a mindful way? I talk about the term unconscious binge marketing, which is what a lot of companies do. I haven't used that term for a while, but it's kind of, we'll use every message we can possibly find, and we'll find as many medium as we find, from Twitter to TV advertising and everything in between, and we'll just blast the market as much as we can. And yeah, it's kind of like so I always say very clearly, know your purpose, consciously create your messaging around that, consciously talk about how you deliver your promise of your purpose, because the purpose experience needs to match the purpose promise. And then be very mindful in the way you use medium that you use and how it's used and so on. I think a less is more approach these days.
I don't know whose quote I'm going to either completely annihilate and ruin or misattribute to the wrong person, but in any event, the sentiment I'm trying to convey is, rather than shouting louder, 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 it's perhaps about whispering the right words in the right ears, right? And I think that's really what my interpretation of what you're saying is. It's not how many ads can I throw out to the market that's buy now, buy one, get two kind of routine, all that sort of stuff. It's blunt.
Get one root canal and get the second one free.
Yeah, I know, totally. I mean, that's got to be the worst ever marketing, isn't it? Because you repel people.
And look, your employees, I think, are a really untapped opportunity for marketing. They're your greatest ambassadors, and obviously your satisfied patients are your greatest ambassadors as well. So I feel like for many of us, our gold is right there in front of us when it comes to marketing. And what are you teaching your employees to share about your practice? When they're out at a barbecue on a Saturday, are they saying wonderful things about the practice and not spruiking for business, but what messages are they giving out about what they do every day? Yeah, I think very often with marketing, the gold's right under our nose, and it's not, that's where the opportunity lies.
I totally agree with you, and I'm probably going to sound a little contrarian as I say this to the audience listening, because I tell you, Carolyn, there's something that probably really offends my sensibilities when it comes to marketing. And I totally get that other people have a different perspective to me, and I'm not here to give them a hard time. But what really bugs me is the bottom of the barrel race to the bottom type of marketing. It's do it cheaper, do it for less. And for me, every time I see an ad like that, a little piece of me dies, because I actually think we can be much more than that. And I would rather talk about something it's a little more aspirational. And I don't mean aspirational necessarily in the terms of dentistry, which of course could mean that, but not only that, but thinking about, let's elevate our vision a little bit beyond how do I just get a backside on a seat, and doing that in the fastest, bluntest, crassest, most awful way possible for me, which is cheap kind of marketing. And so that's probably a bit of a soapbox, but do you have a view on that at all, just while I'm ranting?
100%. I think it's understanding the business model that you're creating as well. Like, I'm just thinking about my own instance. Like, I've done a complete pivot in my own business at the end of last year because I'm building a purpose leadership program. And that's a premium price point, and the big companies are interested in it. I've kind of started the conversation with them. But I'm actually now doing speaking and lunch and learns and all these other different things, really at a low risk, low cost way to start with. And the reason that I'm doing that, and I call it low risk, low cost, is because companies don't want to be paying $50,000, $100,000 upfront for me to go and consult on purpose in their organisation. They need to, it's a bit of a try to buy. I know it's different to a dental practice. And I believe that the more people that I can get the message of purpose out to, and the more employees that I can impact and so on, is that the greater my take up will be as I'm evolving this new service offering. And I'm sharing that example because I've had to pivot just because I'm doing these things at a low cost. You know, keynote speakers cost $5,000 or more, you know, for a professional keynote. And I'm professional, but that's no longer a valid business model, making a business out of keynote speaking. I feel like it's kind of a bit limiting. So I've had to really repivot my business model, which has then affected the way I communicate and market. And I've changed, and because I've done that, I've seen a massive increase in the number of people that want to book me. And for me, it's a strategy, not because I'm going cheap or undervaluing myself. I have a bigger end game in mind. And so therefore, and the way I communicate it is I actually tell the truth to my clients. The reason that I'm doing this is because I need to get this message out to everybody. And then I want to be able to reconvene with you to offer you something that's going to take you to a whole another level, you know. So I think that authenticity and integrity in that, if you are going to do something low value, and I know dentistry is very different to what I do, so I can't really articulate, but I guess my long answer to what you're saying is, if you know what your business model is, and if there is, it's the way you communicate it more so than what it is you're charging, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly right. So I've got no problem with fee structures and making it accessible to people. It's the messaging and the way it's communicated, that,
and the truth behind it too,
totally,
isn't it? It's the authenticity behind it.
Absolutely. And as I say, just a little piece of me dies every time I see that,
because it also sets up. It has an industry impact. It's not just the impact on the practices. If you've got 3 dentists offering cheap prices and there's 3 other premium dentists in the local area, it's going to impact the dentistry community. It's kind of, there needs to be some collegiality rather than competition, you know, some collaboration. And how do we all, you know, there's enough business for everybody. You know, thousands of people that don't get their teeth checked every year.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that's exactly right. The pie,
Millions, I'd say.
Yeah, the pie is big enough. The pie is big enough.
Absolutely.
And I think that's yeah, I totally agree.
That's actually another vein of the book of conscious marketing, as I talk about collaboration versus competition.
So tell me a bit more what that looks like. What do you mean?
So I think if you look at Keep Cup, for example, I use a Keep Cup and they're the cups that people use instead of disposable cups, and their purpose is to kickstart the demise of the disposable cup. You know, they've got a massive purpose. But Keep Cup can't actually replace every single disposable cup in the world. They can't be a company big enough to actually do that. So if they've got competitors in the so-called competitors in the marketplace who also share that same purpose.
It's collaboration.
It's collaboration. And I think that when your purpose actually inspires your competition or your perceived competition, then you know you've got something that's a winner. We can turn industries around on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point, because if the goal really is to, just for the sake of, or for the lack of a better wordsmithing on the fly, if the goal of the profession is to elevate dental health across Australia, then really all of us are in alignment with that. And if that's truly our purpose, and I'm using the word truly very specifically and deliberately, rather than just focusing on the money, but if our purpose is to do something a little more noble, to do something a little more elevated, then really we are, as you say, in collaboration rather than competition.
Fred Hollows comes to mind when you say that. You know, just imagine if that's then connected to dental health of people in countries that can't actually access dental health, which is Fred Hollows Foundation, and restoring sight in countries where, you know, there's terrible eye defects and blindness and so on. So like if you then connect it to a problem that the world is facing, it kind of makes it almost like, hey guys, we can all do this together.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Let's get on the bandwagon together. So, Carolyn, we've spoken a bit about conscious marketing. Tell me about the Purpose Project, because I know that's a book that's very close to your heart. And as an author now of a multitude of books, that's a pretty special book. Tell me a little bit about it and where it came from. What was the impetus to write it?
Well, the impetus to writing it was probably the roadmap that I wish I'd had when I went to France.
Yeah, okay. But then you wouldn't have had Unstuck in Provence.
Absolutely. So like it was the book that kind of the roadmap I wish I'd had about how we find our purpose, how we create, because I don't believe we find it. I think it's already in us. We create it and we practice it and we do it. And we do it through taking on projects. And there's a lot of talk around the world around purpose at both an organisational perspective and a personal perspective. And I wanted to write a book that would combine the both, that would explore organisational purpose and personal purpose, but also help people bring their own purpose into the workplace. Because my biggest learning, as I've already alluded to you, is that I didn't have to leave banking to become an author, that I could have done both. You know, I see so many disenfranchised, unhappy employees and leaders in companies that are there for the dollar. And I want those people to stay where they are and change the cultures of the organisation by tapping into their own unique personal purpose and bringing it right into their workplace. And so I wrote a book to really address that opportunity.
Great. And I note that you've always said that action precedes clarity of purpose as well. So I think coming back to that comment you made earlier, having that roadmap, knowing how to traverse the various points of that journey is going to be a really useful resource. So for the audience listening to this particular podcast, I'd really encourage you to head across to Carolyn's website. It's carolyntate.co. Just head across. It's Carolyn, CarolynTate.co, and you'll find actually a stack of resources, books, of course, but some really interesting and fascinating articles there as well. I'd really encourage everyone to have a comb through the website because there's some really wonderful things. Carolyn, you've been incredibly generous with your time today, and I firstly want to say thank you. And secondly, I want to say I think the work that you're doing is really important, and I think that the chorus that are singing from this particular hymn sheet is getting louder every day, and I suspect you're the band leader of that chorus, and that's wonderful. I think it's a tremendous thing to be doing. As we wrap up though, I just wanted to ask you if there was one or two key takeaways that you wanted to leave the audience with, something practical and tangible, whether they're a business owner or whether they're working in someone else's business, it really doesn't matter. What sort of things would you suggest would be appropriate and applicable for those people?
I think the first thing is to really take some time to explore, ponder, think about your own purpose and whether you're actually really fulfilling it at work, like surrendering to the idea that if you're not, then like to me it's kind of sometimes there's something missing and people are not willing to do the exploration to work out what that is. And so that would be my number one advice, is the courage to really know whether you are on purpose or not. The second would be to have the conversation with your people and be brave enough to really dig deep around purpose, what it is to them. Are they fulfilling it at work? What's missing for them? Like to be able to have the conversations. I think that's the first thing, is like be willing to have the purpose conversation with yourself and with your people. And then I would encourage businesses from that to really think about their own purpose statement as a company. What is our purpose? And in the book, I have a framework on how do you create a powerful purpose statement. And then how might that, just to gently explore how might that purpose statement be integrated in the company vision and strategy and all the other things that the business has to do. But yeah, I think everything starts with why, with purpose. It's the starting point. It's a starting point of the conversations. It's a starting point of the stories that you tell. It's a starting point of marketing. It's the starting point of your people strategies. It's the starting point of profitability. I think it's a really important thing to spend some time to deeply explore.
I concur 100 million%. Thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, and of course your incredible generosity. Carolyn, you're a gem. And once again, ladies and gents, if you'd like to find out more about Carolyn and her work, and I strongly encourage that you check it out, please head across to carolyntate.co and check out books, blogs, and other bits and pieces on the website. There's just such a good amount of stuff there that I know you're going to want to sink your teeth into and really get into it. Carolyn, once again, thank you. You're a gem.
Thanks, Jesse, for having me on the show. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jessie Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.